So firstly, there's a few things you're gonna have to do when you first start this project. One is locate the fuse panel. And for the Toyota 2015 RAV4 LE, it's actually right under here. Normally there's a panel cover over it that shows you kind of what each port does, but I removed that earlier from a part 1 video to identify which fuse ports I'm going to be using. Okay. From here, if you look up in the manual, it actually says that you can remove this panel if you want to. I'm going to remove this panel because I want to try to route it through here and possibly the cables through this wiring strip up here. Yeah. So if you notice from earlier, the kit for the hardwiring, actually the dash cam kit actually had one of these tools. It's a panel remover tool, and you can use that to get in through here. These are just kind of like plastic clips and they pull right out. Go from the top and then go to the bottom. Now you can remove these wires if you want to. I'm going to, just because I need to kind of access, well, I just kind of want to get out of my way. So there's just a few clips here. And it's pretty simplistic. It's, match the shapes to the shapes. Now this one's the only one you kind of got to be careful with, because it's like looks like a pinch type here. I don't want to break this off. Okay, so I actually took a little pair of pliers because there's a little pinch. There's these two prongs that stick out. You gotta pinch together and then it comes out. Or not. And there we are. This is what it looks like. These two things are what you're trying to pinch together so that it unlatches. Alright, now we'll just hang that off to the side for a moment. Put this down here. Actually. Okay. Now, we can see our fuse panel is right here. And so we're going to connect it through the bottom here into one of these ports, and then route it through this panel underneath over on top. Once you get to this step, you generally have an idea of how you might want to route the wire for your dash cam. So coming through here, through the bottom, come up here, and I'm thinking I could run it along this wall here, and then actually come up from underneath this panel. There's a little bit of space there, not too much, but it might be just enough for me to fit the wire. There's been times where before I had it, the panel just sticking out ever so slightly, not really noticeable, and then I'd run it through here and underneath the wiring, the weather strip. Weather strips are pretty durable. I wouldn't be too worried about it. They're kind of just like little rubber sockets that you pull in and out. Pretty easy. And then you put a wire in underneath and route it all the way through the top. Here at this point, you can take this part out. So see how easy it comes out. At this point, I would want to maybe come over to the opposite side and just kind of run it up here until you get to this cross section. After you get to this cross section, I typically don't like to remove the airbags just because I don't really want to mess with it. I squeeze this part in and it gives a little bit of space in there that you can just route it just a smidge underneath. And if you can't because it's too tight, if you have a little bit of the wire hanging out here, it's not too bad. And after that, at that point, come in through the top. I know you probably can't see, but there is a little bit of give and a space in there. They can just shove the wire in underneath. Works for most cars this way. After you come down to about the middle, you can have the wire running down here. You see a little bit of it and you choose where you want to put your dash cam. Okay, now that we have the hard wiring kit, we want to make sure the length is right. So, you know, give it ample amount of space. There's plenty of space down here, and there's plenty of space down here, and there's plenty of tuck space here. So put any excess wiring that you need to the side of this wall here. And then run exactly what you need through the wiring strip. So work your way back. So you would want to start with this end, right at the center, or wherever you're going to mount it, and then work your way back to see how much you're going to need. Lay it all out and start tucking it in all the way down the sides. Bring it in, tuck, 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 all the way down here. And then when you get here, this is where you want to start engaging or deciding which port you're going to be using. And then the rest of the wire you will tuck over here. Now, one of the things that you need to do for the ground cable, in this one right here, you gotta find a bolt or something that is connected to the metal frame of the car. And if I'm not mistaken, this bolt here specifically is not connected to the metal frame. It's all plastic from what I can feel. So I'm actually gonna be taking a bolt from running it through here and then running that onto this corner there. That looks like it's touching the metal chassis for the vehicle. If you want to be sure, you can use a multimeter. I'm fairly confident that that is the metal chassis that you can connect the bolt to. There's another one up here, but this one seems more readily accessible. So what I'm doing here is I just kind of shoved in one end over here, and then I use the panel remover to kind of just lift up the edge here as I'm shoving in the cable for the 3-prong hardwire kit. As you can see here, I tucked it in, and then now for this part, I kind of just lifted this liner, the top liner, up a little bit by pushing it in, and I shoved the wire in. A little bit of play here, as you can see, there's a gap. So we kept just pushing it down in there. Now I'm all the way at this point. At this point, I want to try to remove the weather strip and then just line it under there. Now for this part, this one was a little bit tricky, but as I'm getting lower, I'm tucking it behind this panel still, and then I lifted up the weather strip from the car's side. That way it's sitting on the inside. All I did was pull this back a bit as I pushed it in. Kind of just like that. Alright, we're almost there. Alright, so I've tucked it all the way down here. And then here was a little bit tricky, but I managed to squeeze it in through this little pocket by pulling out this portion of the panel right here, just ever so slightly. Squeeze it into that center. At that point, I still had a little bit of wire hanging out, and I just wanted it to be looking clean. So I pulled back on the weather strip a little bit so that the insides of it comes out, and the wire was covered by the weather strip. Pushed it back in, and now it's all tucked safely away behind the weather strip, and it's underneath. Here from underneath, there is an access point or opening towards this bigger compartment, and then I'm gonna route it back down to this fuse panel. Sure, I could just leave everything down here, but I'd prefer not to, just because it's not as easily accessible if I ever need to get it again. So I'm gonna route it through here and back up to this nice big open compartment, and then route the 3 cables that I need right down here, or rather 2, because we have the grounding point right up there. In hindsight, I probably should have put these 3 at least into this compartment beforehand. That way I wouldn't have to feed it through here now all the way up. But yeah, so when you guys give it a go, try to do that first to save you a bit of a headache. Alright, I've successfully fed all 3 of these cables up now. And the access point I used was right here, slightly to the right of the hood release latch. Just put it to the right of there and gently swing your hand in on top and pull it out one by one. Doing it all 3 at a time might be a little bit difficult because it's a bit of a tight fit in there. Okay, now this part I totally forgot about. It was a real pain to get over. But essentially, I went through here. I just brought the wire back. Imagine this is the piece. Brought it back and tucked it in underneath this top portion, and then slowly fed it in. So at this point, before I feed the wires, before I wrap this up and tuck it in, I want to make sure I connect the 3 ends of the hardwiring kit. So I'm going to do that part next. First by doing the ground, and then by feeding the other 2 connection points down here to the fuses. So at this point, I realized that I can get to that bolt right there, which would work just fine. But I don't have the proper socket with me, so I'm gonna use right here instead. Over there, you just need a Phillips head, nice wide Phillips head, and then just unscrew it ever so slightly. I'm using this because it fits in there pretty nicely, and then I'm just gonna loosen it just enough, just 2 or 3 turns, just enough so that I can shimmy in this portion underneath, kind of like that. I loosened the top portion as much as I wanted to the extent that, you know, this part doesn't actually come off. But since this was originally straight, I bent it just a little bit, which is perfectly fine. The connection's still there, and just shove it in like that so that it's more flush. Alright, now that portion is done, the ground is connected, this black wire. I shoved in the other 2 wires from there, and now all I gotta do is wrap up the rest of these and kind of tuck it in nicely right there. At this point, I want to let you guys know that I'm using the second to last setting here. Sorry, you can't see that too well. But the second to last notch on your left hand side, so the second notch from your left hand side is the one I'll be using. It says 12 volts and 24 volts. The reason I'm using that is because somebody else recommended it on a dash cam footage. On another YouTube video. If I can find it, I'll throw it in the links in it down below, but should work just fine. Like I said from my earlier video, all this does is dictate when to stop drawing power to the dash cam so that the battery doesn't die in the car. I just used one of these things here to bundle it together. It came with the box for the hardwire kit, and then I'm just going to shove it in on the left hand side. Okay, so at this point I chose fuse port 2 for the LE because there was no sunroof, and I'm assuming that means there's still a power source there that's what's it called, a switched fuse. And then I'm gonna go with this port right here, which is number 7 next to the 15, and I pulled out a 10 amp fuse from here and placed it into this one, which is our battery plus cable. The other one here is our ACC cable, otherwise our switched fuse and our constant fuse. And I give an explanation as to which one goes where, which fuse goes where, top or bottom, in the part 1 video. So if you haven't seen that, go ahead and check that out. At this point, I have all of those plugged in where I said I was going to. Slot number 2 for the switched fuse, and slot number 7 for the constant fuse. Simple way you can check the constant fuse is by going here with the car off, and it should show up as powered on. I went down just earlier to unplug it, and it did indeed turn off. So that is in fact your constant fuse. Now I'm gonna do another op check for the switched fuse, which is essentially me taking out the number 7, leaving in the number 2 port, turning the car on, and then the camera should turn on. Hey guys, we're back. So I figured out that the 7 is indeed in fact a constant power source. I've double verified that with the multimeter. And then the 2, however, that for some reason was also a constant power source, which I found was fairly odd, being that it was a sunroof. I'd figured that it would have turned off when the car is off, but apparently not. Maybe there's a 30-minute buffer in there. Some outlets do that. Sometimes they use it for like windows or power seats. So I ended up using the power outlet, which I knew for a fact that it turned off exactly when the car turned off. And so that's what I did right here, in port number 17. So for those of you that own a 2015 RAV4 LE, port number 7 and 17 are the ones you want. 7 for the constant power source, or battery plus, according to the 3-wire hardwire kit offered from VIOFIO. And then 17 is the one that you want for the switched power source. Now it's a little bit funky because you got to start the car to get the little black box here to recognize that it's been plugged in. So once you have both of them set up, start the car up, turn it back off, and then it'll be able to record at a lower frame rate, or time lapse in the parking mode, or that would be through this one, or it can record live. Using the power source once the car is turned on, which is this one right here. But yep, now I just gotta button everything back up. Just be aware when you're using these piggyback fuses, you're probably not going to be able to stick your cap back on, your fuse panel cover. I usually just leave it here, right here in the side door, in case I ever need it. But do with it what you will. Maybe take a picture. So now I got everything tucked back up. Gonna tuck it all in, and then I'm gonna close everything back up. The dash cam has been set up perfectly right there. And now for the second issue, which is getting the power source from this to the rear dash cam. Let's see how we're gonna wire that one up now. 2 things to keep in mind that I had some issues with. I was being stupid, and instead of plugging it up here at the top or the back, however you want to look at it, I plugged it in on the side where it said USB, and so it was acting a little funky to begin with. So it will turn on if you plug it into the USB port. Just know that it will act a little bit weird in the parking sense. The parking hardwire kit won't work exactly as designed, so put it where the actual power source is. And then the one that says rear here, the one on the right USB port, that's the one we're going to be doing next. We're going to plug a wire into there and then route it all the way to the rear. Another thing to kind of note is maybe have a little pair of pliers handy, because removing the fuses from the fuse panel is a bit of a pain when they're about yay big. I can barely get my fingers to hold on to them like that, and when they're actually seated, they only have about maybe just the tip available, and we all know the tip's not enough. Before we start to route this second wire here, then much longer and fatter of coils of wire for the rear cam, just wanted to also do a quick op check to make sure that the rear camera is indeed working as it should. So, okay, so I've plugged in this cable now. And one thing to take note of, which I didn't really notice earlier, but it actually says front or rear, connect to front or connect to rear camera. So just make sure you get those connected properly. All right, now I just want to check to make sure that the rear camera is actually working. So initially, there's a bunch of different settings here that you can choose, like to see which one's front and which one's back camera. Basically, there's this bottom right button here that you can click to choose whether you're looking at the back or front. And just remember that normally when you first get this lens doesn't have a cover right now, but it did come with the black cover that sealed it. I guess that's just to prevent it from scratching when they ship it. So just make sure you peel that off if you're doing an op check and you're wondering why your screen's black or it looks fuzzy or something. So right now I'm showing the front camera, which still has its a cover on, so you see black. Now I'm going to switch it to rear camera, which doesn't have the cover on, and it looks good. So we know the power source works correctly. The car's off and it's still getting power, so that's good. Now time to route it. Okay, so turn on the car's auxiliary power just so that I can see the camera. Now when you install this, you want to click the button so that you can at least see the screen. When you get to the screen, I know it's a bit blurry here, but when you get to the screen, ideally you want to have something marking the front of the car, showing the corner so that you can see it through the camera, and you know that you're covering both edges on the left and right of the car in the front, and you want to make sure that it's somewhat leveled. For the most part though, you can kind of use these dots on the top here to help you line things up. And then after you mount it, you should be able to see the full front view of the car. Now these cameras, they have a pretty wide angle on them, so it shouldn't be too hard to get both edges of the car and then some. Just make sure when you're angling your camera though, like you can hear the notches as it rolls down and you're adjusting camera. Ideally, you want to see most of your trunk. If you want to see a little bit of the inside too, I don't personally see a reason why you would do that. But so just want to see most of your trunk. And I put it as high as possible while seeing in front of my trunk so that I can also get red light signs, like stop signs and stuff, so that if you ever need to use it for any other reason, you can have that in your footage as well. One thing I should have mentioned a little bit earlier when you're doing the install for the fuses is make sure that the settings here, first you got to turn off record, then you go into your settings. You want to go, one second. You want to go move down to where it says parking mode. If you're not in parking mode, you'll see here in a second, it actually has an off function. It was on the off function when I was trying to set it up with the fuses. So I kept thinking the device was off when it was actually being instructed to be off. If you want to be able to see the screen, make sure you have it in like a time-lapse mode where you'll still see that the camera is recording. If you put it in the off mode, it's not going to record. So it'll be a little bit harder to distinguish if you have the right fuse ports for whatever vehicle you're using. So now that we have our camera set up, okay, back it out. We're back in record now. Now I'm going to turn off the car's auxiliary power because we don't want to drain the battery, or shouldn't either way because of the Hardwire kit. But at this point, you want to start tucking it. I have the main power source coming from the fuse panel on this left hand side right here, and then for the right hand side, I'm going to be coming in with the power connection to the rear camera. And so all I'm going to do here is lift the headliner here in the passenger side a little bit as I'm shoving the wire in. And now I'm going to do this all the way back. Okay, so I wire tucked it here by pulling this down a little bit, the headliner. Like I said, there's a gap up there that runs all the way across. Tucked it in, went through here. I lift this panel ever so slightly with one of the panel removers, and I just wedged it in there. I didn't actually remove the panel, I just wedged it in there so I can run the cable. Now when you get to these corners, it's going to be a little bit tight, but you can push it in if you just flex the top liner in addition with the wedge. Okay, and then after I got to this point, I ran it all the way across the top here under the liner right there. That's this weather strip out here. Wedged it under that weather strip. Came all the way to this side, and then same thing over here. Pulled this panel back a little bit, pushed this in a little bit, and I wedged the wire all the way across. After reaching all the way across, same thing, weather strip right under, just tucked it in. This one was real easy to move in. Same thing across. Now when you get to these plastic portions here, they're a little bit tighter, so you just really got to work it in, use a little bit of muscle, and shove it in there. Ran it all the way through the top. Now, what I've come to realize is that this is a lot of extra cord. So ideally, on the RAV4, since the rear trunk opens up like this, the camera would ideally be stuck somewhere there. Now, I don't know about you, but I prefer not to have this gigantic, massive cable hanging off, but this is kind of a trade-off here. So instead, what I'm gonna do here is I'm planning to rip this back all the way up to here, run down the weather strip along the door, come across this plastic panel using some of the supplied clips that was in the box for the dash cam. So after you run it across here, I'll probably swing under this little rack thing for the cargo cover, and then run it down, and then I'll have all the excess wire here. Actually, most of the excess wire here, and then come out to the weather strip once again. Probably loop it through here, come out to the weather strip, come all the way up, and then have a little bit of excess, just enough excess from here to here, with a little bit of play. All right, let's get to that next. Okay, so right here. Now they've provided us in the dash cam box for the VIOFIO a little clip. All you do here is you put this into the clip, and this actually clips closed. Okay, so what I'm gonna do here, essentially, after running it down the weather strip along the door, I'm gonna run it across here, down, and leave the excess under this WeatherTech mat, or your generic floor mat, doesn't really matter. So, after cleaning this side up, because we wanna make sure the surface is nice and clean, I'm gonna remove the tape. Now these clips hold pretty strong, so you're not going to be able to pull the power cord through and through when it's clipped in fully. So I'm going to do it a little bit tight and close to the door. That way, that way the seatbelt doesn't get caught onto it. Hold it there for a few seconds, make sure the adhesive really sticks on. Then we're gonna do the same thing. Through and through with the rest. Okay, so put one over here and one over here. Now some things you should keep in mind is to try and place them on flat surfaces rather than this curved portion right here. Just cause like these clips, their adhesive is flat, the surface is flat, so it's going to get maximum point of contact or surface area contact when it's on a flat surface. So I'm going to run it down here, try to give it a little extra slack so the clips aren't working too hard, and then I'm going to run this under the floor mat. At this point, we still have a lot of extra cable left, but because we want to make sure that this is actually going to be enough slack for the camera over here, we gotta measure it out. So we want the camera here with a little bit of extra slack, and then we're gonna run it like this down the weather strip, and down here. So I want to make sure that works all together now. So at this point, you want to make sure that you're measuring backwards using the slack. So I think I might have to mount the camera now to see how much slack I'm working with. Alright, so at this point, when I was working backwards, I placed the camera here to kind of gauge where I need to bring the wire. Ideally, I would want the camera right here and have it facing outwards, but since this is a stiff component, or the stiff end of the cord, it doesn't have too much flex, so I have to bring it down to like about the third line up here. So you want to make sure the camera's lined up. You have the stiff part of the cord extended. You start tucking it in under the panel here on the trunk at the top. And so I'm just tucking it in. And now here is somewhat of the tricky part. You want to make sure you have enough slack. Ideally, you'll have two people with you, so somebody can try to like help you close the door, but you can still manage on your own. So if you see right here, excuse me, and I can't see too well from in here, but as this is being closed, this is what's happening on the inside. Have a little bit of extra slack. And so yeah, you're gonna have an ugly wire dangling here, but I mean, it's a trade-off of having a dual camera here. So the best I can do was, instead of putting the slack right there in the center, I kind of offset it towards the side a little bit, so that the excess wire is hanging off towards the left. And then at that point, you'd have it running down here along the weather strip on the inside. I just kind of did a pull and tuck, tucked it all the way down, brought it in, and here it is underneath. And that's where I'm just gonna leave the excess wire. It's not too much, and it should be fine just laying underneath the mats. Now at this point, we have the wires already tucked in, cables here, and we just gotta plug it in and adjust this camera notch here. And mount it onto the windshield. Make sure you clean the windshield before you mount it on, like with any adhesive. Want to make sure the surface it's adhering to is clean, so there's no debris that can prevent it from not sticking or fall off. Alright, now we have the back camera installed. Let's see if I can focus in on that a little bit more. Sorry, it's such poor quality, so much sun here. Alright, so I have the back installed. Like I said, far right button, you can scroll through which camera you want to look through. So I'm seeing through the back right now, and I'm just making sure I got at least as close as coverage that I can see of the bottom of the trunk window, the rear window, so that if anybody hits you from the back, you might be able to get a better look at their license plate. But you don't want to bring it too far down such that the bottom of the rear window is you're seeing all of inside of the rear trunk. So we did a tuck job here. Left side, main power source coming from the panel underneath the instrument cluster, the fuse panel there, and then the wire for the other camera, the rear camera, being routed from the front side and the right side through this wire strip. Weather strip, sorry, right through here, then go across, go through the top, down, the weather strip still. And then now that you're in the back seat view, came over here, coming down, over, wire tuck here. Could have probably done a little bit of a better job on this one. Over here, down. Now I brought the wire all the way down here onto this weather strip. Going across, using the adhesive clips that was supplied by the dash cam box. and a little bit of excess underneath the floor mat, riding along the weather strip of the door all the way here. Weather strip still. Come out, give it a little bit of slack for the rear view camera. Sorry. There you have it. And that's how you install the VIOFIO dash cam dual camera setup onto the 2015 Toyota RAV4 LE. Now, the fuses that I used, the fuse ports that I used for this vehicle, they should be the exact same fuse ports that you would be able to use on an XLE or any other model of the RAV4, realistically. So, if you like this video and you found it informational, please give it a thumbs up, and subscribe if you want to. Looking to post more videos, but I'm not that popular, so I don't blame you if you don't want to. It's all the same. But if you did find it helpful, that way I know to keep posting more videos like this. And thanks a lot for watching this video.